Real quick, I want to go over the reason that we have to address these tuners at some point. So the way, and I took one of them apart really just to take the backing off to show you the construction behind it. The way these are made, and I'm going to try to show this on camera. If I hold this like really still, there's a little bit of play here. You might actually see it better with the post. There's quite a bit of play there. Maybe you can even hear it. So there's some side to side, and that's not my finger slipping back and forth. That's actually the post moving the tiniest bit. And I'm going to show you why that happens. And again, this is more to do with cheaper tuners, and it's really just because of you know, bad tolerances and quality control, essentially. So I'm just going to take this out for a second. So the post is essentially made of three different parts. You have the actual post itself, which has a little threaded insert here. You have the spoke wheel, or cog, or whatever you want to call that, the gear. And then you have the screw that holds the gear to the post so that as you are turning the worm gear, which is what this is called here, it turns the wheel, which in turn turns the post. And that's what allows you to use the tuning machine to tune your string by constantly wrapping it around and tightening the tension on the string. Because you're essentially winding the string very slowly around the post several times usually. Well, what can happen on these cheaper tuners is that the tolerances of how thick and thin this plate is and how long the screw is, those can be a little wonky when you don't have really good quality control. When you have a company that is making really good tuners, they're going to have it down. They're going to have things, go through like a little inspection period. But with this, it's sort of like, yeah, as long as it works. And it does work, but it doesn't hold tune very well, which is what our concern is. So I'm just going to show you one of the things that can happen. I'm just going to tighten the screw. And you notice I'm doing it without the plate right now. Just to explain a little bit. So if you look carefully here, I've tightened the screw all the way as far as I can into this post. And there is, I'm going to zoom this out a little bit actually. There is a small gap. You'll see that there's like a little, almost like a little divot going all the way around the post. And what that's designed for is to fit this base plate, which you can see is also very thin. So ideally, if everything was perfect, this would be the exact dimensions needed to fill that gap perfectly, so this would be nice and snug. However, if this is a little bit thinner, or if this is a little bit longer, or if the threads didn't go as far through, if there's any slight deviation in that, you can end up with a small gap, and that gap allows you to move the post freely back and forth even while it is connected to the base plate. So that's why on a lot of these cheaper tuners, you'll see that they can kind of wiggle out of tune after a while, especially if you use a lot of, Strats have that tremolo system, the vibrato system, technically, but Leo Fender always called it the synchronized tremolo, that allows you to dive bomb and rapidly and viciously descend your pitch and your tension on your string. When you come back up to pitch, this is probably going to have shifted slightly because, again, it's not very tight, it's not very snug. And that little bit of movement can be one of the factors that can throw you out of tune if you are an avid fan of using the whammy bar. So what we're going to be doing is trying our best to make sure these screws are as tight as possible. And then at some point, probably on the next iteration of this, I'm actually going to go back and modify it slightly, these tuners, so that there isn't that little bit of, and again, hopefully you can, I don't know if you can really see or hear, but just by tightening it a bit, it helped. But there is still going to be some, hopefully you can see that, there is still going to be some side to side. Even with the screw tightened in all the way, we're still having that effect. I'm just going to retighten it now because I did just kind of pop it out. And you can see there's only so far that you can actually move the screw. because the threads on the inside of this post end at a certain point. So there's a maximum depth that you can go to with that screw. Now, I suppose one thing you could do is you could, if you really want to get into it, you could take a Dremel or something and shorten the screw slightly so that it can go further into the post and make this so that it really grabs onto this base plate securely. When we go back and modify this, though, we're going to actually add something to this system to essentially create just a small spacer between where the screw is and where the post is so that it does grab the post completely and keep it snug and firm, which is going to make the tuning machine quite a bit tighter to use and a bit stiffer, but it will be a much more sturdy and stable system by doing that. Now again, you know, obviously you could always just upgrade these tuners if you wanted to, but part of this challenge was seeing how far we could take what the parts are on this guitar and trying to basically put as little money as possible into getting it to be decent. So we're going to see what we can do to use these tuners the best that we can. They're never going to be really good tuners. They're never going to be Grovers or Spurzels or those nice Hipshot ones. These are always going to be cheap tuners. The question is, can we work with them to get them to do more or less what we need them to do? Because right now, right out of the box, the tolerances, like I said, are just really not there. There's too much wiggle room in either direction, and it's just not going to be very stable the way it is. So we're going to see what we can do to fix that. But for now, as we're putting it back together, I'm really just going to leave it the way it is. Just make sure that that screw is tightened up all the way, which this one is. I mean, I can't really tighten it any more than it already is, and there's still that bit of wiggle room. So, again, tolerances, quality control, that's what leads to this. It's not because the design is bad. I mean, this is a pretty basic design for a tuning machine. It can work if those little things are taken into account. If the tolerances and the quality control are tight enough, this could be a really good tuning machine, but that's just not what we have to work with. So, you know, you get what you pay for. This is on a really cheap guitar. This guitar was probably $100 when it was brand new, if that. So, yeah, this is one of the areas that a lot of manufacturers will cheap out on those entry-level instruments. And it's also a part that can be easily replaced, so it's usually not missed. So yeah, but that's one thing to kind of keep in mind as to how the design is and what the problem really is. It's not necessarily a problem with the overall design. The design could work if there was a little bit more attention paid to, like I said, the quality control and the materials. That would make a world of difference here. But we're going to see what we can do to, you know, get as much out of these tuning machines as we can and see what we can do.